this is my second talk. I was hoping to do 5, and I know some of you came for the first talk, and this is the first time for some of you. So I'm just going to briefly summarize the first talk, and we will roll through the slides. And Yash here is helping me because we are having a problem with the clicker. So thank you, Yash. So next. In the first talk, we looked at the challenge of moving towards spiritual advancement in Hinduism, because it is hard to explain and define what that looks like, because the words that we have, which we all understand, and we talked about orange juice as an example. When I say orange juice, you know exactly what it means, because you know the color, you know the taste, you experienced it. If you talk to somebody else, they have had the same experience, so the words make sense. But when you come to spirituality, we have not all experienced getting close to that state, which in Hinduism is called moksha. And it is easy to say what it is not, but it is very hard to say what it is. And that's where we have to make our own path. There isn't a single path that leads us there, and we talked about the various ways to do it. So can we do the next slide? This is, next slide. So these are some of the things we talked about that can help us move forward in that direction. There's prayer. That's something we all do. We come to the temple, we pray. That can help us progress spiritually. There is meditation, and again, meditation is described in various scriptures how to do it. There is reading of scriptures which can help. A guru can help. And then there are different kinds of activities which are defined in the Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures. There's karma yoga, where you do something without an expectation that you will get something out of it. There is Gyan yoga, which is the knowledge of Maya. Maya is the concept, Maya is the magic by which we see this world, and we get pulled into it. And the Maya takes us away from what is defined as the ultimate reality in Hinduism. That is, that there is God, and God runs the world. We and God are not different. And that is the Advaita theory in Hinduism. There is Bhakti. Bhakti is devotion to God, which can help us get close to God. And then there is the system of yoga. These three things, karma, jnana, bhakti, are part of yoga. But there is Ashtanga yoga, which has many different components which can help us. Next. And ultimately, we talked about the fact that all of these things can help, but they are not essential. People can make progress with these, but there is no guarantee. The only thing which is essential, and we use the term kripa, Panditji said kripa, which is the most accurate term. The closest English translation probably is grace. If you do everything, but you don't have the grace of God, you would not make progress. And some people get grace for reasons we don't understand. They get it easily, and they make spiritual progress. Next. So these sessions, we were looking at neuroscience. You definitely don't need neuroscience to make spiritual progress. But we now live in a world where we want to make sense of things. If it doesn't make sense, we don't want to do it. And what I'm trying to do here is to look at what neuroscience says and what the scriptures say and how it all makes sense. The idea is that if it makes sense, we are more willing to do what we need to do to make that progress. Let's keep going. Next. So this is the second talk. And in this talk, I'm going to be talking from a neuroscience perspective about attention, reward, emotions, habits, and self-regulation. We are going to take some scriptures, some shlokas from the Bhagavad Gita, and we are going to also look at some of the science. So let's talk about attention. At this point in time, you are paying attention to me. How long do you think your attention will last? When the lecture gets a little boring, your mind will wander off. All of you had something for dinner. How much time have you spent thinking about what you had for dinner? Probably none, unless you had something very different and interesting that drew your attention. Now imagine that you had hurt your knee as you were coming into the temple. You bumped it, and the knee is hurting. Would that be drawing your attention? Would you know that your knee is hurting? What is the difference between your knee hurting and so many other forms of information that you have available to you? You know, you are at the moment sitting with your legs crossed or uncrossed. Who is sitting with the legs crossed? Who is sitting with the legs uncrossed? How do you know? Because I asked you the question, that's why you know that. You could have known at any point that you paid attention to it, but though this information is being sent to your brain constantly, you're not really paying any attention to it. The attention is pulled when the brain gets the signal that something important, something which has a higher priority, that information is coming to you. And the attention is not completely in our control. So if you had bumped your knee, you would not be able to ignore that. In fact, if it's hurting really bad, you would not be able to pay any attention to what I'm saying, because that is drawing your attention all the time. This priority system takes us away from the things that are happening in the moment. We talked about dinner. Nobody thought about what they had for dinner since they had dinner. But imagine that you were having an argument with somebody at the time that you were having dinner. Heated argument, very upsetting. Would you have paid attention to that? You would have paid attention to that even if it was upsetting, even if you didn't want to. You didn't want to think about it, but you couldn't stop thinking about it. It's running in your mind again and again and again. Your attention is being pulled. Your attention follows a priority system. And the challenge to attention is much bigger in the environment that we live in, but it is not a new problem. And here I'm going to take a shlok from the Bhagavad Gita. This is, I think, chapter 6. And this is, you know, the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna has gone on for some time. And he has given him, the information about Karma Yoga. And then Arjuna says, this is what he says. He says, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balvat dhritam tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkura. And what it means is, this is next in verse. Are you able to blow that up? I'll read it out. I don't think we can on that. So, the heart of man is unfixed, Krishna. It is rash, it is tumultuous, it is willful and it is strong. I think it is easier to hold the wayward wind. You can probably control the wind, but you can't tame a man's heart. What you are telling me is very hard, it seems impossible. So the challenge to attention is not new, but the challenge is bigger for us now, because the things that draw our attention are many more than they were at the time of Arjuna and Krishna. In fact, we live in a time when every commercial entity which is producing a product that they're trying to sell you, whether they are trying to sell you a game, whether they're making a news report, they are trying to draw your attention. And they are getting better and better at it. Next. So this is Shlok 62 and 63. And I'm going to read it, and you tell me if you understand. Dhyayato vishyan pumasah sangas teshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodho vijayate krodhad bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramha smriti भ्रंशद बुद्धि नाशो बुद्धि नाशात pranashyati. You understood? Me neither. The great thing, Panditji has understood. Panditji? We are not going to translate it yet. We will do it at the end. And we will do it after going through neuroscience, and then the profound wisdom captured in such a short shlok will become evident to us. We talk about paying attention. Paying attention is difficult, especially when the thing is not rewarding. If it is not drawing our attention, either because it's painful or because it is tempting and rewarding, it's hard to pay attention. The attention follows a priority system like we discussed. More rewarding, we want to pay attention. More painful, we pay attention. Otherwise, no. But attention can be trained. As you practice paying attention on purpose, you can get better at it. And this is one of the things that Hinduism teaches us. We do meditation, we pay attention. We control the attention, we stop the mind from wandering. So now I'm going to talk about mind wandering from a scientific standpoint. What exactly happens? Next. Yes? How often are our minds wandering? Sometimes people come to us and say, my mind wanders, I've got ADHD. Now, you might, but what is the normal expectation that somebody who doesn't have ADHD, doesn't have a mental health problem, their mind will be wandering? This is a recent study, it's 2010 now, so 12 years old. Our minds are wandering half the time. Half of the time that we are awake, our mind is somewhere else. When our minds are wandering, we are less happy. And that is because, again, if you think about the priority system, if I'm worried about my health, but it's a small problem, and I'm worried about my finances, that is a bigger problem, my mind will go to my financial problems more. When our mind is wandering, we are not able to do the tasks that we are supposed to do. When we are upset, our minds wander more. And actually, mind wandering has been suggested as a marker for depression. When people are depressed, their minds are wandering more, they're ruminating. Next. Our attention follows things that we find rewarding. And there is a reward system. The reward system is a primitive, basic system that allows us to do the things we are supposed to do. So if you take a bacterium which doesn't have a brain, which doesn't have any nerve cells, and you put it in a sugar solution, and the sugar solution has a concentration, and if the bacterium can move, it will move towards the high sugar solution, higher sugar concentration. That ability to do the things that we need to do to allow us to live, to eat, for example, that is very primitive. It is coded in the lower part of the brain called the mesolimbic system, and it is coded by a chemical called dopamine, which goes up and down. As the dopamine goes up, we pay attention. The dopamine has a basic level, like a tone, which can gradually go up and down, and then a phasic level, which goes up and down quite fast, depending on what is the stimulus. And this rise and fall makes us pay attention, makes us motivated to do the things that we want to do, and our attention follows the things that we find attractive. And to look at attention and look at the scriptures, I'm going to take a story about attention. So attention alone, training attention alone has been said to be path towards attaining spiritual advancement and moksha. So this is the story of the cowherd and the monk. In ancient India, once upon a time, long time ago, there was a sadhu who lived outside of a village. He had been meditating for many years. He was spiritually advanced, and he was well known. People who would go on pilgrimage would stop by to do darshan and to get spiritual guidance from him. So in the village, there were many people who lived. One of the villagers was a young boy. He was a cowherd. He was not educated, but he knew about the sadhu to whom many people came to visit. So one day he went to the sadhu and said, Maharaj, I know that you are very spiritually advanced and I want to learn about God. So please help me. So the sadhu says, who are you? He says, I'm a cowherd. He says, do you have an education? He says, no. He says, look, spiritual advancement and finding God is not for you. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of education, reading scriptures. Go away, do your work. Don't interrupt my meditation. So the boy goes away. The next day, he turns up again and says, Maharaj, I really want to find God. Please help me. So, same thing the sadhu says, he goes away. Now this happens a few times. And the sadhu thinks, this is not working. I have to do something that makes him go away for good. So the sadhu says, you know what? This cow that you're herding, this is God. Just follow the cow and keep following it until you find God. So the cowherd says, thank you, and he goes away. And for many days he doesn't come. So the sadhu thinks that he has been successful. He's not being bothered anymore. Many months pass, and then the boy comes to the sadhu. And he says, Maharaj, you are a true guru. You are very knowledgeable. I am blessed to have your guidance and your presence. And the sadhu says, really? Like, what happened? He says, the advice you gave me was so good. I did exactly as you said. I paid attention to the cow and thought that cow was God. I paid attention to it without stopping. And then I realized God. After many months of trying, I realized that the cow was not God. I was not God. But I am not any different from God. My consciousness dissolved and I became one with God. I realized that the cow and I and you and with God are one. We are all in the same presence of the God, and the Maya is making me and you and the cow appear different. That is such good advice you gave me. You knew exactly what to tell me. So the sadhu had given advice thinking he will go away, but by paying attention on purpose in a persistent manner, he was able to train his attention to the point that the consciousness dissolved and he had the experience of moksha, oneness with God. So, paying attention is one of the key components of spiritual advancement. Managing your attention, and as you do it, it gets better, it gets easier. My analogy to people is, paying attention is very frustrating when you are not trained. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. It seems impossible. When you start riding a bicycle, it seems there is no way you are ever going to be able to balance this thing because it falls all the time. But as you keep practicing, it becomes easier, and then suddenly, one day you're riding. And you're riding it and you're able to balance it. And it is the same thing with attentional control. As you meditate, your mind will wander, it will wander, it will wander. And then it'll get easier, it'll get easier. And as you're able to sustain your attention, it will become easier and automatic. And you have to, just like with cycling, you have to persist until you get to that point. Same thing with meditation. You have to try it, and you will eventually get to the point where you are able to sustain that attention. Next. Okay. So now, I am just going to talk back from the scientific standpoint about the reward system and how it works. And I'm going to take a story of a fictional patient of mine called Jack. I think some of you might have heard this before, but I think it's probably worth repeating. The reward system which we talked about, it works on dopamine, and we want what we want. It seems that when we get what we want, we will feel happy. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately, which is why our scriptures say that you have to get away from wanting. So we'll talk about Jack, and Jack is now in his 60s, but when he was 22 years old, he was studying finance and accounting in a college. He wasn't doing very well financially. He was working in a minimum wage job, and I'm going to ask you to help me understand how his reward system works. The dopamine is a chemical in the brain which rises up and down, and you can tell me what's going to happen to his dopamine. And we learned about how when we have a reward lined up, the dopamine goes up. So he's working minimum wage. One day a friend comes and says to him, you know, I work in a restaurant as a server. I have an opening. One of the people left. If you come to my place, you can make $100 a night in tips alone. What's going to happen to Jack's dopamine? It's going to rise. Why is it rising? It is rising in anticipation of something that he might get. He has not got it yet, but the anticipation that I might get something already pulls the dopamine. Next. So that is anticipation. Next. One more time. That's the first rule of this part of the brain. Anticipation of something coming our way makes us feel good. It draws our attention, makes us feel good. There's also a calculation about how much am I going to get and is there an error. One day he gets $150 tips, more than expected. What's going to happen to dopamine? Go up again. Why? There's an error and it's beneficial. Something happened which got you more than you expected. Captures your attention and makes you learn, and you like it as well. Next. If we follow this guy's dopamine level every day as he gets paid, what's going to happen over many days? Say, you know, day 1, day 2, day 30, what's going to happen when he gets the same amount in tips? What's going to be the dopamine rise compared to the previous days? Yeah. So it will actually begin to go down a little bit. The first day, first paycheck, yes. 10th paycheck, 100th paycheck, still a little bit of a rise, but you get used to it. The $100 doesn't feel so awesome anymore. And this is true regardless of the quantity that you get. If he goes on to become a big guy, which he did, and he makes a lot more money, first, very good. Eventually, stagnant. So the reward system gets used to anything that it gets repeatedly and doesn't respond in the same way. But the reward system always makes you want the bigger thing. So if he were to get an offer from an upmarket restaurant where he's likely to make twice the amount of money, would he take it? Yes. Now that is a logical, rational choice. But inside of him, he will feel the urge. There's an urge in, I want this. And that is coded right in the base of your brain. And this is because, next, we prefer to go after larger rewards over smaller rewards. And this is the concept of incentive salience. Now let's throw in a little twist into the story. So he gets a call from a lawyer, and the lawyer says, we are just working through your aunt's will, and the aunt had passed away 6 months ago, and you are going to, in her will, she left you $100,000. What's going to happen to his reward system? Big spike, big spike. And sometimes, it will not be a single spike, there might be many spikes, because first he's getting $100,000, then he's also thinking what he's going to do with that. I'm going to get a new car, I'm going to get a new rental apartment, I'm going to go on a vacation. So boom, boom, boom. What does he have to do? What does he have to do in the evening? Still has to go to work. And how much does he get? Get $200. And does he notice? What does that do for him? Nothing. It doesn't even register. It doesn't matter. When his expectation is $100,000, the $200 are, it is or it isn't, doesn't really matter. And that is a core feature of the way our brains work, and that is a big problem for our current environment, because now we have got chemicals which are readily available, which we can use to get that $100,000 high. We live in an environment where off the street you can buy all kinds of drugs, and all drugs work on this system. And if you, and people say, the young people say, why can't I use this? Why can't I get high? Well, because if you do, you're going to feel high, but you're not going to be able to enjoy anything normal in your life. So you don't want to do that. That is the main reason you want to absolutely stay away from anything chemical that alters your mind and makes you feel high, because it takes away your comparative liking of other things. You're not going to enjoy things that you normally enjoyed before. There is no free, I got a high and I'll feel normal ever again. It doesn't work like that. And we will look at how that happens. So we talk about how when it's responding to large rewards, it doesn't respond to small rewards. So 1 month passes and Jack calls his lawyer. And Jack says, hey, you called me about $100,000, what's going on? And the lawyer says, I just called you to say that that's what you left you in the will, but there are, we have to sell the assets, there are court costs to pay, and then we'll see how much is left. And at the moment, it doesn't look like you are going to be getting anything at all. Oops. What's going to happen now? Well, he's going to have an emotional reaction. He's going to feel something. He's going to feel very strongly. And, he could feel angry, sad, anxious even. If he's already spent too much money, he might feel anxious. But let's go with anger. Let's just go with one emotion. And he's feeling furious. And he wants to do something about it. He wants to, call the lawyer's malpractice, maybe sue the law firm. Maybe he's going to complain about it to some kind of agency. Something has to be done to get that money. This is just wrong. And something interesting happens to his memory. In the past, he's never really thought about lawyers because he's never had any dealings with them. But when he was 15 years old, his father was yelling at a lawyer on the phone, very angry. And what did he think at that time? Well, my dad, he does these things, like teenagers think. And now he thinks, oh my God, Dad was right. These lawyers, they do weird stuff. And it just doesn't, they mess you up. So the anger is making him recall certain things in his past and reappraise them to go along with what he's thinking at the moment. But let's carry on with Jack's life and see what happens next. So loss of an anticipated reward produces an emotional response. And this upset will get better over time. So give him a month or 2 months, and he's still back to the same place working at the server. For the first few days, you will see that his dopamine is actually going down. Even the baseline, the tone level is down. He's feeling unmotivated, upset, doesn't feel like doing much work. But a few months later, it will recover a little bit, and again, the small reward which he gets with the $200 or $100 is kind of back to normal. Let's keep going. So after some time of not getting that large reward, your system does reset, and it is again able to respond to small rewards. But this reset is not perfect. So to understand this, we will follow Jack's life and go forward 15 years. So 15 years later, he's finished his training in finance, accounting, done a master's, he's working for a bank, in investment banking. He's making $500 million a year. And this is before 2008. The financial crisis happens, he loses his job. He's not able to find a job in finance because so many people are looking for jobs. So what he does is, he gets a job teaching math, which was his master's in a college, and now he's making $50,000 a year. And initially he's feeling relieved, He had made a lot of money, but he had spent a lot of money, but now he's got a little bit of an income, he's feeling good. Okay. But imagine Jack's reward system compared to his colleague's reward system, who is also a math teacher making exactly the same amount of money. His colleague is making the most money that he has ever made. He has always been a math teacher. He's gradually gone up the ladder and he's making the same amount of money. And Jack has gone here and dropped to this same amount of money. When they get their paycheck, how does their reward compare? Well, you will find that the colleague will have a particular reward and Jack's will be a little lower. He's good that he's getting the money, but there's something in there which says, this is not where I belong. I used to be the banker who made 10 times this amount, and that is where I belong. So there's always going to be a deficit. Now, if you give two people the choice between these two kinds of lives, would you go like this, or would you just go like this? Everybody would say, I'll take that, right? But the way our brains work, that path leads to more unhappiness than this path. And that is just how this is designed, which is why if you say, well, I'm going to try drugs just once or twice, and then I'm going to stop. And maybe you're going to be successful in stopping, maybe you're not. There is no guarantee that if you expose yourself to drugs, you will not be an addict. The only way you can be guaranteed is if you never expose yourself to those things. Even if you manage to stop, there might be a permanent resetting of the system of your brain which is linked to pleasure, which is linked to a sense of reward. Next. And this is what, so this is a graph which I want to draw your attention to. So if we get, quite large pleasurable things, sometimes even going to a very great vacation can do this to you. I think if you see graph A, that is the normal process. You feel pleasure, it kind of goes down and you go down below your base level a little bit. That is normal. If you use drugs and you get that kind of high which you're not expected, the next time you might get an even higher high because now you know how high it can feel, so you already feel a little high in anticipation. You might think this is a great thing. The problem is, if you do that, the brain resets and says something is wrong. This is not how we're supposed to feel. So the baseline, if you look at C and you look at the starting point of the black line, that is no longer at 0. That is below 0. This is often something people don't realize is caused by their drug use. And they say, oh well, I feel depressed all the time and the only way I feel normal is if I use drugs. That is probably true, but it was caused by the drug use in the first place. If you stop using, you look at graph D, you can see the baseline has gotten close to 0, but it is not back to 0 because the reset is permanent. And I think, my core sort of thing that I do with my patients is to tell them, you never want to risk resetting this baseline below 0. If you try to push it too high, that is what is going to happen. And that is the main reason you never want to expose yourself to large quantities of alcohol or any drugs. And this kind of thing can also happen with anything else that you might find rewarding. It can happen with intense video gaming. It can happen with gambling. So those things can do that too. Next. Like we talked about just now, when next. So when this reward punishment system is not getting what it wants, you had the $100,000 and you didn't get it, then you see those two horns. That is the limbic system of the brain, that is the emotional system of the brain, that produces an emotion which makes you feel intense feelings and want to do things that might get you the reward back. And in Jack's case, he was angry, he wanted to sue the lawyer, he wanted to complain to the lawyer's board or something to just find a way to get his money back. Next. Oh. These are lions. The reason they are here is because they are my favorite animals. Anybody want to take a guess at why lions are my favorite animals?
Family gives happiness.
Okay, that's a good one. I like it. It's a new one. Anybody else? Yes. Kings of the jungle. That is what people often say, kings of the jungle, but that is not the real reason. Next. That is the real reason. Lions are incredibly lazy. And that is just like me. They sleep for 16 hours a day. And that's what I would like to do. You know, when I went for a job interview and they said, what is your goal in life? What do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? I said, I want to live like a lion. What does that mean? I said, you know, sleep for 16 hours a day. And they said, you know, you should try the hospital next door. We don't have a job for you. But of course, lions are actually famous for being the king of the jungle. And the lion responds in a particular way when the lion is challenged. So there's another interesting fact about lion, and I don't know how they did the study, but they studied how lions raise their cubs. And when the cub is learning to hunt and he's biting daddy lion goes, ouch, much more than it hurts, to encourage the cub to bite harder. Just like we do, you know, if you have a kid who's playing baseball and they just manage to hit the ball, and you say, oh, well done, you know, do it again. So lions do the same thing. But lions live in prides, and every now and then the head lion will be challenged by a lion who might come from outside, or from it might be his own son who's grown up and is challenging him. And when that happens, the lion responds in a very peculiar manner. He roars loudly, so loudly that you can hear him 5 miles away. And he shows his teeth. His heart is racing, blood pressure is going up, muscles are getting tensed, claws are going like this. And what is he saying? Don't you mess with me, look at me, I am powerful, I am ready to fight, I am going to defend myself. At this time, he doesn't really say, oh, you know, you're my little son, you know, I'll let you take. No. The reaction has many different components, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that reaction is preserved across the animal kingdom, across the spectrum. And when Jack is feeling upset, let's go back to the situation with the lawyer, and he hears that the $100,000 is not coming. He's going, what? What? He's screaming in the phone, his hands are going like this, and he's going with his teeth. And he had the same urge to somehow attack and defeat the lawyer, to do something. And of course, you know, in this case he doesn't. But if you just ever have a chance to Google road rage and see what people have done in situations like this, they have ended up in jail, they have ended up killing other people, so it can be devastating. That's next. So negative emotions arise in a particular context. They make us pay attention to events in a particular way. They happen automatically, they're not in our control, and they change our perception by making us recall emotionally salient information in particular ways. So Jack, at this time, when he's having an argument with the lawyer, is able to recall everything negative that he's heard about a lawyer at any point in time. But if he's had a good experience with a lawyer, that is something that is not available to him at this time. Does that make sense? This is the brain trying to make you do things in a particular way. And they change our behavior in a way that might allow us to get the result. Next. And this is just like a grid in which you can say the emotion might be annoyance, anger, rage. They make us pay attention in a particular way. You are thinking of things that made you angry. You might be upset with the person who did something or didn't do something that made you angry. And your urge is to intimidate, defeat, and humiliate them, to get help to kind of push them back, to get what you want. Next. And this kind of thing can be drawn for other emotions, but we're not going to dwell too much on that in this talk. Next. All right. We are back to our 2 shlokas. So far, what we have learned is attention follows reward. When the rewards are too high, we don't pay attention to lower rewards. When the rewards that we expect are taken away from us, we have an emotional reaction. The emotional reaction can make us do very rash things. It has many components. The muscle getting tense, memory is affected, we have an urge to act, to defeat, intimidate, and our hands are clenched, teeth are clenched, and we are feeling an intense sense of almost passion. And let's now look at the translation next. So this is the translation. While contemplating sense objects of a person, the attachment to sense objects arises. From attachment develops desire, so a more intense level of wanting, which can then lead to anger. From anger, you have what is described here as illusion, and which affects your memory. Now your memory is taken over, which leads to bewilderment. So you are not thinking and judging normally. Loss of intelligence, and from the loss of intelligence, one falls. Shlok 62-63. So next. So this is just a translation in verse. So if one ponders on objects of sense, there springs attraction. From attraction grows desire. Desire flames to fierce passion. Passion breeds recklessness. Then memory, all betrayed, lets noble purpose go and saps the mind till the purpose, mind, and man are all undone. So in 2 sentences, in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, what I told you in the last hour of neuroscience is summarized. Now you could read it and almost miss it because you're reading through so many shlokas. But this understanding of how our brains work was so profoundly available such a long time ago, and we somehow, a lot of us just miss it. I missed it. I've read the Bhagavad Gita many times before I ever, did psychiatry. And then when I do psychiatry, I kind of, oh my God, I read through this. Yes, it made a little bit of sense, but now it makes a lot more sense. Let's go. So what do you do? In Shloka 60, chapter 2, verse 64. Ragadvesa vinuktes tu visayan indreyas charan atma vasyayat vidheyatma prasadam adhigachati. So what is this saying? This is talking about something, and I'll explain that in a moment. Next. This, of course, is ice cream. It's my apologies for showing this to you before lunch. It's my favorite food. I don't know about you guys, but if I ever go to get ice cream, I have a very peculiar experience. Next. I always see this. 25 people in front of me in the line. What just happened? I wanted something, my reward. I went to get it. Something got in the way. It is delayed for a long time. As per the shlokas, what is going to happen to me? I'm going to have an intense reaction. There's going to be a passion. I feel angry. Certain thoughts come automatically to my mind. I'm like, what's wrong with these people? Why are they eating ice cream at this time of the day when no normal person eats ice cream? I'm normal, I'm different, but these people are not. This is why we have an obesity epidemic in this country, because everybody is eating ice cream all the time. And I sometimes have the urge to kind of, yell at the person behind the counter, like, can you see so many people are waiting, can you not hurry up? Of course, I don't do any of those things. I just stand politely and smile to people. How am I able to do that? Because we have the faculty of self-regulation, which is available to us as humans. Next. I think we have to keep going a little bit. Next. I think we're out of time, so we'll just get to the translation of that last 2 shlokas. Let's go. Keep going. Next. Yeah. So here we're talking about attachment. We'll put the translation, I think. Shlok 65, I'm not going to read it. My Sanskrit is, I'm becoming more and more aware of how weak it is. Next. So this is Shlok 64-65, which is right after 62-63 that we had done. If one deals with the objects of sense, the objects that attract us, not loving them, not hating them, but making them serve his free soul, which rests serenely, Lord. So I am on top of those things that attract me or repel me. I am in control. Such a man comes to tranquility, peace, and out of tranquility shall rise the end and healing of his earthly pains, since the will governed sets the soul at peace. This is self-regulation, which comes, one, with the realization that it is available to us. It comes with attentional control and practice. It also comes with emotional regulation, which we have an ability to do, which we can actually improve with practice. So I'll stop here and take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes.
So, thank you, first of all, for a very detailed talk. So, I feel that when this was written, there were no smartphones and devices that just constantly seek our attention.
Yeah.
And maybe as adults we can do that, but how do we train our kids? It's because I believe that if you take their smartphones away, it's like you've taken a piece of their identity away.
That's right.
It's so traumatic for them. So, how do we teach them?
And I don't have a simple answer to that. That is a challenge that as a parent I face every day. And what I try to do is to educate my children several times, because I think they are getting information from you which may be a little harder for them to accept than information that they're getting from their peers. And after a while you will have some buy-in. You will tell them, look, sometimes you are doing this even when you didn't intend to. Maybe if you're on TikTok, and TikTok is like, I think they have perfected automation. You can be on that brainlessly, and they are just stimulating your reward system a little bit, one after the other, keep going, and it becomes habitual. You can do it without thinking, automatically. And pretty much every social media company that is in business is trying to automate that behavior, because that is the only way they can make money. If a company says, we are going to make a product which is not going to be so much fun to use, of course they're going to be out of business. They have to compete with the other companies. So all of these products are made to capture your attention, to automate your behavior so that you do it all the time. And if you are going to do what you want to do with your life, you're going to have to rescue yourself from that pole and take some time out. And this is something I tell my children, and I think as a society, we have to get to that point and say, there are studies which show that even having a smartphone lying turned off on your desk reduces your task performance. So the distraction is there even when it is not on. So this is the converse, that is the only thing we can do. The children now need it because they need it to communicate. That is how they relate to their friends. But there have to be time limits, and there have to be recognition that the companies who are designing these apps are not in it for your benefit. They are in it for their financial profit. And they are not meaning to necessarily do harm, but the business model is such that they have to compete with every other company which is also trying to do the same thing.
So the social media is definitely attacking us every day. So the only way to protect ourselves is by paying attention to wherever attention is going.
Yes. Yes.
That's the only way we can protect ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the understanding I gathered from
Right.
what you said.
That's right. And our awareness of where our attention is going and having a sense of how much of our time is being taken out. And I think like companies are also realizing this. Apple now allows you to know, how much screen time you have spent. You can even get a notification of how much screen time you have spent, or if it's going up or down. So that realization is there in those companies to some extent. But ultimately, this is our time which we have to rescue, and we have to fight for it. And protect ourselves. And there are advantages with the social media. We are able to connect with people across the globe. In the old days we would not have been able to connect so much. So there is that plus side as well. But we have to know how much time we want to spend on social media, decide that time, and not spend any more. Let them not take away our time from us.
That cell phone question you have asked, I think most of the stuff, everything has a positive and a negative, okay? So, if we stress the children the positive effects of the cell phone, use of positiveness, and then also tell them the negative. So we stress the positive things. So it's everything, the food, same thing. Food is important, sweets are important, but you have to have limitation, moderation. So everything is important, so we have to tell ourselves, including the adults, that they are good, but at the same time they have the other side of the coin. So we have to understand that and then watch. So.
With teenagers, if you tell them Earth is round, they'll argue with you. No, it's
You tell them it's flat.
So they're going to do that, but we just have to keep pounding. So we just keep and hope they turn out. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.